Hi everyone, my name is Gisela and today I'm going to share one of the chapters of my PhD, which is about the howler monkey mothers and their individual variation in maternal care. So just a little background, the individual variation in maternal care is usually allocated along a continuum. So you have at one end the protective style, and the mother usually stays in close proximity with the infant and is very aware of its activities. And at the other end, you have the rejective styles. And mother within this end, they are more relaxed about the approaches and leaves of their infant, and they're not very anxious about them being further away. So what we do know about the maternal style is mostly regarding the old world monkeys, and we know very little about the neotropical primates. Neotropical primates are generally smaller than the old world counterparts. Our largest species can be up to 20 kilos, but the howler monkey itself can be between 4 and 6 kilos. The species are generally arboreal, living in tropical forest, and agile, which means that it's very difficult to observe them for long periods of time. Additionally, most species interact less, and in the case of the howler monkey, they sleep a lot. So there's not enough free time for them to interact. So not only it's hard to observe them, but they don't interact as much. And when they're awake, they're not interacting. So when you consider all these variables, how can we detect individual differences in a species that interacts so little? And when we consider the maternal care, which is all about the interaction between mother and infants, that's very critical. So I collected data in the Carlos Botelho State Park. It's a park in Brazil of mainly Atlantic forest. The trees can be up to 40 meters high. This picture shows the canopy of the forest, and the howler monkeys occupy the canopy, so it's very hard to observe them for long periods, let alone to see the interaction between mothers and infants of a very tiny monkey up in the trees. But I followed 3 mothers from 2017 and 2018. I don't expect you to remember their names, but I kept the colors throughout my talk. So you have the green mother, the orange mother, and the purple mother. So I compared 2 data sets, one with focal data, which I recorded the pairs, mother and infants, and I have about 500 analyzed videos, and I collected the traditional categories of maternal care, maternal style. So you have the proportion in physical contact, if this contact was made or broken by the mother, and if the approaches and leaves were made by the mother, how much of her time she spent grooming her infant, if she restrained them, if she rejected the interaction, and so on. I also calculated Hinder index, which understands what's the importance of each individual from this diet in maintaining proximity. So maybe it's the mother, maybe it's the infant. So this video is quite interesting because it shows how a mom and her infant, it's not a picture, it's a video, and how they interact. So it shows pretty well the interaction and proximity is mostly a responsibility of the infant. They are the ones who approaches and leaves the most. But even so, the index was close to 0, which means that it's kind of like even. But when they are in close proximity, they don't interact as much. So 85% of my data were 0, considering those categories that I've talked on the previous slide. And this is pretty much represents how the mothers interact. So having that much 0 is a statistical problem. So I combined the categories in positive and negative, and being positive, those that are aiming for the proximity and contact between mothers and infants. And you can see here that the orange mother has very high positive rates, and the purple mother has very high negative rates. But I have to call attention to the fact that the interaction rates is still pretty low. This is the amount of interactions per hour. So there are some behaviors that I've never seen, but when combined, yes, we can see a trend. And when I move forward to the calculation of maternal care, and you do this via a PCA and factorial analysis, and what I saw was like a lot of overlap in the observation in the data set and lacking statistical significance, which means that they're not statistically different. So the mothers, they all present the same maternal style when you consider the data set from the focal. But one of the categories were highly variable, which was the time in physical contact. The orange mother had spent 75% of her time with her infant, and the other two didn't differ that much. So then I moved on to the data collection for the scans. So every 20 minutes, I wrote down who was the nearest neighbor, the mother and the infant, how many times I saw, how many countings I saw them as the nearest neighbor in comparison with other group members. And here you have 0 for the spatial association index using the social network analysis. So 0 index is never together and 1 is always together. And infants at very young age, almost newborn, you already see difference among mothers. So the orange mother spent almost 100% of her time with the infant, and the other one about 80 to 85%, which is very unusual because we are talking about a newborn. When the infants grow older, these indexes kind of decline in value, and here the dashed line are the mean values for the group, so considering all dyads. And even so, mothers and their infants have a stronger indexes in comparison with other dyads. So even if the infant is old enough to be weaned, they still stayed in close proximity with the moms. So this is a visual example. This is one of the mothers. She basically left her older son babysitting her newborn 1 month old. And she just, you can barely see, but these two are two young, very young monkeys. And she just checks, but moves on. And when you consider the other one, so here's also a newborn with the dominant male and its respective mother. She's here, but at some point she just like, okay, maybe it's just too far away from me. She approaches it, the baby comes to her back, and then everything is fine, which is a very opposite style. And you have long-term outcomes of this individual variation. So the maternal care have long-lasting effects on the trajectories of their infants. So at one point you have an inadequate maternal care that can lead to the death of the infant, but at the other end, if the infant survives, the protective mother can raise insecure infants, while the rejective mother can raise both individuals. It doesn't mean, again, that one is good and the other one is bad. It just means there's different, and they have like intergenerational effects. So thank you for listening to my talk, and I'm open for questions.